You got LaVine, who's an elite perimeter scorer. That could form a big three. Keegan Murray could benefit the most with that, because with defenses tilted toward LaVine, Sabonis, and DeRozan, Keegan could develop into a 20-plus point per game score this upcoming season. And if you look at the roster building, if the best case, you got veteran stability, plus you got the young depth approach could be validated. The Kings don't need to chase another star. They can focus on adding role players and defense to this team if Zach LaVine thrives. And if he's healthy, the Kings should open a 3 to 4 year window to maybe contend in the West. Welcome back to another episode of our Kings related podcast, wherever you may be. And on today's episode, we're going to look at the best and worst case scenario for Zach LaVine for this upcoming 2025-26 season. But first, please, if you're watching on YouTube, give this video a thumbs up, a subscribe, leave a comment down below. If you're watching on Spotify, please rate 5 stars and leave a review. And also on Apple Podcasts, 5-star review and a nice little review would be also much appreciated, and also available wherever else you get your favorite podcast. But Zach LaVine, what is the best case scenario for Zach for this upcoming season? Health for most important thing for Zach LaVine for this upcoming season. And if the Sacramento Kings want to at least do anything this upcoming season, because he's battled injuries during his time in Chicago, and Zach this past season between Sacramento and Chicago, he played in 74 games this past season. Incredible, because the only time Zach's really played a full 82 was in the 2015-2016 season. And then after that season, he's played in the 40 game range. He played 24 games in 2017-18, and then he played 60 games in back-to-back seasons after that. And then he's kind of hovered around the 60 game mark, 70 game mark. He did play 25 games with the Bulls in the 23-24 season, but playing 74 games between Chicago and Sacramento last season, really good for Zach LaVine. And if he can play at least 70 plus games this upcoming season, that is a real bonus for the Kings. Could his explosiveness be back? And is he moving like he did in his prime years early in his career when he was making the 6th Man of the Year candidate, a 2-time All-Star during his time in Chicago? Can he show that? Plus, can he be an efficient scoring threat for the Sacramento Kings this upcoming season? Because he's averaging 22-25 points a game on a strong shooting split of 47, 38, and 85, while fitting in alongside Sabonis' playmaking and that mid-range game for DeRozan. If Zach can do that, that's a really good sign, not just for him, but for the Kings as a team. Can he be that clutch player alongside DeRozan? Zach LaVine could become that go-to perimeter scorer in the crunch time, in the fourth, giving Sacramento that closer that they missed last season when they traded De'Aaron Fox to San Antonio, and that they lacked. So you could have two clutch closers this season if Zach LaVine is healthy, and if somehow the Kings make the playoffs, can he have a big playoff series for Sacramento if they get in there? I don't think they will. And where he swings games with his shot making and shaking off those empty stats that he was labeled with during his Chicago Bulls time. So can he shake off that narrative of the empty stats? So like in short, like the best case for Zach LaVine is he thrives as a perimeter star for Sacramento this upcoming season. Most importantly, he's healthy. Hopefully he is. And if the Kings somehow and surprise us, could he have a redemption in the playoff? Because we've also heard what Scott Perry has said about Zach LaVine in that video that was leaked after Scott Perry was hired. And in the worst case, you got the injuries, the poor fit that could derail not just Zach's season, but also the Kings' season, making him more of a liability than an asset that he is. And if Zach LaVine can hit the best case scenario for himself and Sacramento, the Kings could be one of the most explosive offenses in the West. I wouldn't go as far as saying being team one when they broke the playoff drought, but with LaVine, DeRozan, and Sabonis, a three-headed scoring core, you got Keegan Murray. Could he continue his growth? And Zach's spacing and shot creation could make life easier, not just for him, but for everyone on this team. And then I'm not going to talk about the playoffs because you got to get there first. I don't think the Kings, as constructed, are not a playoff team as constructed. So that's if Zach LaVine can hit his best case scenario. And if he does, could this validate that trade from last season? No, because I know Scott Perry would not have made this deal if he was the GM at the time. I believe De'Aaron Fox would have still be on this team, and Zach LaVine would not. So, and the Kings could go from not just a fun team, but they could go from maybe a playoff contending team for this upcoming season. But I don't think a lot of people have high hopes for all that to work out, because injuries do happen, and two of your core guys are a bit on the older side of past 30. So we shall see. Worst case scenario, the injuries, they linger here in Sacramento. That could limit Zach to around that 40, 50, 60 games, affecting his burst. You got the fit issues. We saw it after the trade. He can struggle to find the rhythm in this new Kings offense that Doug Christie wants to implement, that features DeRozan, Sabonis, and LaVine. Could end up as an inefficient volume scorer. And we know the liability that Zach LaVine brings on the defensive end of the floor. Opponents will exploit Zach LaVine on the perimeter. If you have LaVine out there, Malik Monk, and even DeMar DeRozan, and that could force Doug Christie to limit Zach LaVine's minutes in those closing lineups. Plus, you got the trade buzz in this worst case scenario. Zach's contract and the health concerns, they could weigh on the Kings' flexibility, leading to speculation that he could be moved at the deadline or next offseason if things don't work out this upcoming season. So, and if Zach LaVine, falls into this worst case scenario, you got him missing significant time and looks inefficient while he's on the floor. The offense bogs down with too much overlap between DeMar DeRozan and LaVine, forcing head coach Doug Christie into tough rotation decisions. And the Kings, they could lean heavily on Sabonis, Murray, and Malik Monk, and the Kings could hover around the 35, maybe 40 wins mark, maybe in that position of that playing mix, or just on the outside of the playing mix in a very tough and competitive Western Conference. And without a reliable Zach LaVine, the Kings don't have enough perimeter creation to scare some of the elite defenses in the NBA, if it's in the West or the East. And they might sneak in to the first round, but in my opinion, I don't think they will. And a matchup with the Nuggets, the defending champions, the Thunder, and even the San Antonio Spurs could send the Kings home quickly if they do even get in the playoffs. So the worst case scenario is they do miss the playoffs entirely. In a West that's brutal, and Zach's contract becomes dead weight, because apparently the Kings were the only team that would trade for Zach and that contract last season. And the impact that could have on this franchise, where the pressure could mount on GM Scott Perry's decision making in the front office, and a LaVine trade starts looking like a gamble that set this team back in flexibility, and it could force Sacramento into exploring trades and maybe a retool around Sabonis and Keegan Murray. If Zach LaVine is really the swing factor for the Kings season this year, if he's healthy and efficient, the Kings could be a dark horse in the West. I wouldn't predict that. But if Zach struggles this upcoming season, the Kings could be at risk of being stuck where they have been the past several seasons. And that is in the middle of a very brutal Western Conference. And like the long-term impact, if Zach LaVine thrives, you got your franchise hub in Domantas Sabonis, Keegan Murray, two-way wing cornerstone. You got LaVine, who's an elite perimeter scorer. That could form a big three. Keegan Murray could benefit the most with that, because with defenses tilted toward LaVine, Sabonis, and DeRozan, Keegan could develop into a 20-plus point per game scorer this upcoming season. And if you look at the roster building, if the best case, you got veteran stability, plus you got the young depth approach could be validated. The Kings don't need to chase another star. They can focus on adding role players and defense to this team if Zach LaVine thrives. And if he's healthy, the Kings could open a 3 to 4 year window to maybe contend in the West. Not likely, because if you look at all the teams around you in the Western Conference, that is going to not go well, because there are teams that are absolutely better than you in the West. And the long-term impact, if Zach LaVine falters, the franchise still has Sabonis and Murray as the foundational pieces, but Zach's health and contract, they become a major anchor to this team going forward. And then you got DeMar DeRozan, who's in his mid-30s. That's not a long-term piece. That is a short-term piece. And DeRozan, who's probably on the tail end of his playing career, so the Kings could risk stalling once the production fades. Zach LaVine. And then you look at the roster building, the pressure that Scott Perry could be in to making tough calls if this happens. Does Scott Perry attach picks to move Zach LaVine or gamble on him bouncing back? If the long-term impact of LaVine faltering this upcoming season. And then you also got to look at the depth around Sabonis and Keegan Murray. That suddenly matters more to the building of this Kings roster and the young players that you have, like Devin Carter, Isaac Jones, Clifford, Reynaud, who are all expected to accelerate in their development this season if the worst case scenario does happen this season. And then the Zach LaVine deal could be seen as a setback if it eats into the cap space that limits the Kings' flexibility going forward, and Sacramento could be at risk of being seen as they have been the last couple of seasons, of being in the middle of the pack of a brutal Western Conference. Do you go all in tanking? Under this ownership group, this team will not tank, and that's not good enough to contend, because we know this team will not tear it all the way down and tank like we saw the Oklahoma City Thunder. That's what the Oklahoma City Thunder did. That's what I want the Sacramento Kings to do. I want them to duplicate what Oklahoma City did. But as long as this ownership group here in Sacramento owns the team, that will not happen. It's unfortunate because this team, they're putting pieces to a puzzle that does not fit. And I don't believe Zach LaVine, the DeRozan piece, it does not fit with this team, with what they want to do going forward. So the bottom line is Zach LaVine is the swing piece between Sacramento kind of being a contender or stuck in the middle, as we call it, NBA purgatory. If he hits, Scott Perry's roster building vision looks brilliant, maybe. But if he misses, the Kings, they have to find a way to pivot and recenter around Sabonis and Keegan Murray as the long-term duo of this franchise going forward. No question. If the Sacramento Kings get off to a slow start this season, they should absolutely pivot before the calendar turns to 2026. And it all depends on Zach LaVine. As your starting two guard, if he hits his best case scenario, it might be a good season. But if the health concerns do linger, we are in for a long season, and I want to see those young players like Isaac Jones, Reynaud, and Clifford. I want to see them play a lot, getting most of the playing time, and not relying on your aging veterans if you are out of it. So what do you think is the best and worst case scenario for Zach LaVine for this upcoming season? Let me know in the comments down below. That would do it for this episode of our Kings-related podcast. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up, a subscribe, and leave a comment down below. And we'll catch you next time on another edition of our Kings-related podcast. As always, take care and go Kings.